You know that quiet feeling when something disappears and suddenly everything that was attached to it starts collapsing at once. That is exactly what happened here, and what looked like a simple deletion on a screen turned into a moment so intense it shook not just Bai Lu but everyone watching. So stay with the story, because what you are about to see is how one silent action created a storm that no one was prepared for. It started with nothing dramatic. No announcement. No warning. No public message. Just absence. Fans noticed it first. The post was gone. Not hidden. Not archived. Gone completely. The exclusive moment that once connected Bai Lu and Dylan Wang in a way that felt personal and different from everything else they had shared had simply vanished. At first, people refreshed their screens thinking it was a glitch. Then they checked again. And again. And then the realization hit. It was not a mistake. It was intentional. Within minutes, the internet began to react. Screenshots resurfaced. Comments reappeared. Old reactions flooded timelines. People began asking the same question over and over. Why would he delete that? Because this was not just any post. It was the post. The one fans had replayed countless times. The one that felt unfiltered. The one that seemed to exist outside the usual polished image. And now it was gone. While fans were still processing the disappearance, Bai Lu had already seen it. Reports from those close to the situation described a moment that was not loud, but deeply emotional. She did not react immediately. She stared at her screen longer than expected, as if waiting for it to come back, as if hoping it had not really happened. But when reality settled in, everything changed. Her composure did not break all at once. It cracked slowly, first in silence, then in expression, then in presence. Later that day, she appeared briefly in a controlled setting. Nothing unusual on the surface. But those watching closely noticed the difference. Her smile did not reach the same level. Her responses were shorter. Her focus seemed distant, as if part of her attention was still somewhere else. Somewhere tied to that missing post. Behind the scenes, the emotional weight became clearer. Because deletion is not just removal. It is a decision. And decisions carry meaning, especially when they involve something that was once shared publicly and celebrated privately. People began revisiting the post from memory, describing the details, the way they stood close, the tone of the caption, the timing of when it was released. All of it now felt more significant than before. Because once something disappears, it gains a new kind of value, a deeper kind. The kind that makes people question why it mattered so much. Meanwhile, Dylan Wang remained completely silent. No explanation. No follow-up. No clarification. And that silence became the center of everything. Because when someone removes something meaningful and refuses to explain, it leaves space for interpretation. And interpretation spreads quickly. Some believed it was a professional decision, something related to image or future projects. Others believed it was personal, a sign of distance or conflict that had not been publicly acknowledged. And a growing number of fans began to see it as something deeper, something emotional, something that could not be explained with simple reasoning. Back on Bai Lu's side, the impact continued to unfold. Insiders described a moment where she finally stepped away from everything. No cameras, no audience, just space. And in that space, the reaction became real. Not performed, not controlled, just human. Because what makes this situation powerful is not the deletion itself. It is what that deletion represented. A shared moment, a connection, a piece of something that existed publicly but felt privately significant. And when that disappears, it does not just remove content. It removes meaning. As the story spread, more details began to surface. Fans noticed that it was not just the post. It was the timing, the specific moment it was removed, the context around recent interactions. Everything began to connect, forming a narrative that no one could confirm, but everyone could feel. And that feeling is what drives stories like this forward. Later that night, a short clip appeared online. Bai Lu in a quiet setting. Not speaking, not reacting, just sitting still. Her expression calm on the surface, but carrying something deeper underneath. Something unresolved. Something unfinished. That clip became the defining image of the entire situation, because it showed what words could not. It showed impact. Real impact. Dylan Wang still did not respond, and that absence became louder with every passing hour. Because silence after a decision like that is never neutral. It becomes part of the story. Now everything remains open. No confirmation. No denial. Just a space where something once existed and now does not. And in that space, questions continue to grow. Why that post? Why that moment? Why now? Because actions like this do not happen randomly. They happen with purpose, even when that purpose is not explained. So now it comes down to you. Think about it carefully. If something meaningful was shared and then suddenly erased, what would that mean to you? Would it be just a digital change? Or something far more personal? Stay with the story, because what feels like a quiet deletion today may turn out to be the beginning of something much bigger, and the next move from either side could finally reveal what this moment has been trying to say all along. Hours after the post disappeared, the silence did not fade. It grew, because the longer Dylan Wang said nothing, the more every small detail began to matter. Fans were no longer just asking why the post was deleted. They were asking what had changed between the moment it was shared and the moment it was erased. And that question carried weight, because something must have shifted. Something strong enough to turn a meaningful public moment into something that could no longer remain visible. Meanwhile, Bai Lu had completely withdrawn from online activity. No updates, no reactions, no subtle hints, just absence. And that absence spoke louder than any statement she could have made. Because when someone who is usually present suddenly disappears, it signals more than just privacy. It signals impact. Behind the scenes, those close to her described a different side of the situation. Not dramatic, not chaotic, but heavy. A quiet emotional weight that lingered even when nothing was being said. There were moments where she reportedly revisited the memory of that post. Not the image itself, but what it represented. The timing, the feeling, the connection. And that is what made the deletion difficult to ignore. Because it was not just content that disappeared. It was meaning. As the night continued, a new layer of the story began to surface. Fans noticed something unexpected. Other posts remained untouched. Other interactions stayed visible. Only that one moment had been removed. And that detail changed everything, because it showed precision. It showed intention. It showed that the deletion was not random. It was selective. And selective actions always carry deeper purpose. At the same time, older clips of Bai Lu and Dylan Wang started trending again. Not because they were new, but because they now felt different. Conversations that once seemed light now felt significant. Glances that once seemed casual now felt meaningful. Everything was being reinterpreted, reanalyzed, reconsidered. Because once context changes, memory changes with it. Then came a moment that shifted the tone completely. A short behind-the-scenes video resurfaced. It showed Bai Lu and Dylan Wang laughing together during a break in filming. Nothing dramatic. Nothing staged. Just a genuine moment. And that moment hit harder than anything else, because it reminded people of what existed before the silence, before the deletion, before the questions. And suddenly the contrast became impossible to ignore. The warmth of that memory against the coldness of the present. That contrast is what made the situation feel real, because it showed that whatever happened was not always there. It developed. It changed. And now it has reached a point where even a single digital action could carry so much weight. Dylan Wang still remained silent. No explanation. No follow-up. No attempt to redirect the narrative. And that silence became the final piece of a story. Because in situations like this, silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. It leaves space for interpretation, for emotion, for questions that may never receive clear answers. By the next day, the conversation had evolved again. It was no longer just about the deletion. It was about what the deletion revealed. About the fragility of moments that seem permanent. About how quickly something meaningful can disappear without warning. and about how public connections can carry private depth that no one fully understands. As for Bai Lu, she eventually reappeared briefly, not addressing the situation directly, not confirming anything, but present, composed, and yet different in a way that could not be easily explained. Because even when someone moves forward, there are moments that stay with them. And this felt like one of those moments. So now the story reaches its final point, not with answers, but with a choice. Because you have seen the moment. You have felt the shift. You have watched how something small turned into something powerful. Now, ask yourself this. If a shared memory can be erased so suddenly, does that mean it no longer mattered? Or does it mean it mattered so much that it could not remain? Stay with this story, because sometimes the quietest actions carry the loudest truths, and what feels like an ending today may only be the beginning of something no one is ready to face yet.